I mean, if you only count goals that were scored by players who had at least one goal coming into this game in their careers, then the Kraken end up winning this one. Unfortunately, that's not what happens. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where us Kraken fans could definitely use some rest and relaxation after these last couple of weeks, as the Kraken have, well, they've lost 4 in a row now and 6 of the last 7, so yeah, it's not going well. I guess if you want a silver lining from this loss, at least the Kraken do this time lose to an actually good NHL team who's also healthy, and they have hopes of a deep playoff run, even if it's not necessarily something that their franchise has a history of doing. Either way, the Minnesota Wild do win this one 4-2, again handing the Kraken their 4th straight loss. And I guess as far as good news is concerned for the Kraken in this one, there's also the fact that it was the first game in a Kraken uniform for Colin Blackwell, who is finally back from that injury that kept him out until this point. But of course, in order to make room for him on the roster, they do end up having to waive Riley Sheahan, who I do think has a chance to end up getting picked up on waivers, though I don't think by any means it's a sure thing, so we'll just have to wait and see there. They also end up mixing things up once again a fair amount on the forward end when it comes to the lines in order to fit Blackwell in. And for the first time in quite a while, that means that they end up splitting up Gordon and Tanev, and while those two had been really fun together on the same line, it had started to fall off quite a bit when it comes to the production they were able to put out, so I think it's fair to mix things up and see if they can't reinvigorate a little bit of that offense, as Gord would center the second line with Yarncroke and Donskoy, and Tanev falls to the 4th line alongside Geekie and Blackwell off of the injury. The other thing of note from tonight's lineup was the fact that once again Hayden Fleury was out of it, and at least to me, that's a guy that, even though I probably would have been surprised to be saying this at the start of the season, I think has earned a full-time job, or certainly earned the right to remain in that rotation that they had with Soucy and Lauzon as well. But this is, I think, now the 3rd game in a row that he's missed, and to me, hopefully we see him back in the lineup pretty soon, as whatever they've been trying clearly has not been working. As the puck drops and we get into the game, early on it looks like we could have a really good game on our hands. The Kraken are looking like they're playing well, and Minnesota is showing why they are near the top of the central standings. With the puck going back and forth and both teams playing really well both on the forecheck and backcheck, limiting opportunities in the offensive zone and trying to get set up on the other side. And finally, of course, of all people, it's Colin Blackwell who gets the first really good scoring opportunity of the game, but he just can't quite manage to bat the puck out of the air past Talbot and into the net to give the Kraken the lead. The Wild do manage to escape that dangerous scoring chance, with the game still tied at 0. And for Blackwell, he was playing pretty well early on and looked like he had a pretty good chance of following in McCann's footsteps of getting a goal in his first game back on the roster. But really, at least to me, what seemed to stand out the most about how the Kraken were playing early on was the fact that their passing was just about as crisp as we've seen it all season long. It seemed like they were almost effortlessly able to get the puck from one end to the other, even if once they got into the offensive zone, they weren't able to get a whole lot of shots off on net, as once again, Minnesota was doing a very good job on the backcheck. However, as just about anybody who watched this game can tell you, that passing prowess that the Kraken showed early on did not last throughout the rest of the game, or really almost at all until maybe very late, as the Wild are eventually able to start sustaining some pressure in the Kraken end as we get towards the middle of the period. And on top of that, the passing goes from being, again, pretty much tape to tape to more often finding a Minnesota stick than another Kraken stick. And really throughout the course of almost the rest of this game, Seattle turnovers would become as much a theme of the game as that continued strong checking from both teams was. This was definitely a pretty physical, high-hitting game, but the Kraken just aren't really able to turn that into pressure the other way. Well, as we're gonna see, the Wild definitely are. Eventually, even though Grubauer was able to bail them out a couple of times in the first half of the period, once we get over into the second half, another odd man breakaway, this time a 2-on-1 for Goligoski and Rem Pitlick, has the puck crossed in front of Grubauer's face, and Pitlick is able to chip it over his pad and into the net to get Minnesota up 1-0, and for Rem Pitlick, his first goal in his NHL career. And yes, for any of you who might be wondering, he is related, being the cousin of Tyler Pitlick, Seattle's pick from the Arizona Coyotes in the expansion draft, who also became the first player in franchise history that they traded away shortly after the expansion draft to the Calgary Flames. And I don't know if he was on some kind of mission to exact revenge on Seattle for trading his cousin, though I think he would be grateful for rescuing him from Arizona, but either way, he was certainly on a mission tonight, as we will shortly find out. But we do end up finally getting to the end of the first period, with the Wild just up 1-0, and I say just up 1-0 because they do get a couple of more pretty bad odd man breakaways, including a 3-on-1 that takes a really nice defensive play to break up a pass, and then a good stick check from Grubauer to keep that one out of the net. Again, the Kraken survived that, and also a 4-on-2 to get to the end of the first period with just a 1-goal deficit. After a very sloppy middle of the first period, the Kraken are able to pull things together a little bit and look at least a little bit more controlled at the end of the first period, which they are able to carry over into the start of the second, which does start off much more like how the first period started and not how it looked for the majority of the time. Maybe even better for the Kraken, as they're able to create quite a bit of pressure early on, even if it doesn't result in a whole lot of shots on net, as once again Minnesota is playing very strong defensively. But at this point, there's at least one Kraken player who doesn't seem afraid to take a shot off on net whenever he gets the chance to, that being Jamie Alexiak, even though most of his shots do end up wide of the net in one direction or the other. Either way though, as a result of a second strong start to a period, the Kraken are at least able to keep Minnesota off the board for the first 5 minutes, so we've got progress there at the very least. Unfortunately, much like the first period, the Kraken pressure does eventually let up, and once again they kind of regress into some more sloppy play, though I have to say it's not quite as bad as the first period. It's still not great. And eventually, again, it's a nice physical play, much as is the theme of this game, this time from Ryan Hartman, who lays a hit on Jared McCann in the middle of the defensive blue line. There's no defensive help behind McCann, and it's Rem Pitlick who gets to the puck first. He gets on an absolutely free breakaway and is able to beat Grubauer blocker's side to increase the Wild lead to 2-0 for Pitlick. It's his second goal of his career and second goal of the game. It's Rem Pitlick 2, Kraken 0. Coming off of this goal, Seattle is able to, for the most part, clean up their act and get things a little bit more under control until almost the end of the period, eventually even taking control of the game and getting some momentum going in their direction, even drawing a penalty towards the end of the period, though much as we've gotten used to with the Kraken power play, it really doesn't go anywhere as they just do way too much passing and nowhere near enough shooting. They manage to maintain momentum through the power play, but as we get into the last minute of the period, if you're just watching the highlights of this game, you're probably wondering why they're going back to Rem Pitlick highlights of his second goal, but instead, this one is actually going to be a whole new goal for him, as another turnover, this time by Gio in the offensive zone, sees one pass, once again from Ryan Hartman, go through the neutral zone right to Pitlick, who's on another breakaway, and once again, he beats Grubauer blocker's side. Grubauer gets beat pretty bad on this one, as it really doesn't look good for him. For Pitlick, again, it's now his third goal of his career and third goal of this game, as he gets a natural hat trick, obviously the first one of his career in the first game that he scores a goal, and it's Rem Pitlick 3, Kraken 0. As we get into the third period, somewhat similar to how at the end of the first period, the Kraken were able to carry the momentum they gathered there into the second. Their sloppy play at the end of the second period carries over into the start of the third, as the Wild are able to get momentum right out of the gate and get a couple of chances off on Grubauer, one of which almost gets around his leg and into the goal, but it wasn't Pitlick who was shooting it, so it does stay out, and the Kraken dodge a couple of bullets there. But then, going the other way, it's finally the Kraken who are on the odd man breakaway. It's a 2-on-1 for Wennberg and Schwartz, but this one ends up falling short as they just pass the puck back and forth a few too many times, neither one willing to take the shot, and the last pass ends up getting defended by a diving defenseman, and Talbot is able to clean up the pieces and keep this puck out of the net. The Kraken are still down 3-0. About 8 minutes into the third, though, it's like the Kraken suddenly flipped some kind of switch and they all of a sudden start getting all sorts of offensive zone pressure, and actually taking a number of shots, which is also a somewhat new thing in the course of this game, which really I think left a lot of us wondering where the heck this version of the team had been since really the first 2 minutes of the game. And while all of this pressure and all of these shots that the Kraken are able to get off in a relatively short window of time, even some second chance opportunities and high danger scoring chances for the Kraken, isn't rewarded with a goal for Seattle, it is eventually rewarded with a call against Minnesota and Seattle going to the power play. Now, I know, believe me, I know when I say that the Kraken are rewarded by going to the power play, there are a lot of you who are probably rolling your eyes as this Kraken power play, well, we've already been disappointed by it once this game and quite a few times throughout the rest of this season to this point. In fact, at this point in this game, they had yet to score a power play goal at home yet this season, or I guess even in franchise history, so there's definitely reason to doubt. But whatever switch this team flipped offensively, again about 8 minutes into the period, maintained itself once this power play got started, as the Kraken win the faceoff and right away start taking shots off on net, which is definitely a new strategy from what we've seen from this power play up to this point in the season. It seems to be a pretty good one. Though, even with a number of shots in just the first minute of this power play, which is already a significant improvement from what we've been seeing, they still aren't able to converting it on the scoreboard, and the Wild are able to clear the puck. Seattle regroups though, and getting back into the offensive zone, a nice passing play, which I know passing on a power play is starting to seem like more of a bad thing than a good thing, but this time it's a really nice pass from Eberle across the play to Wennberg on the other side, who takes the shot at the net, or maybe I should more accurately say, takes the shot at Marcus Johansson's stick right in front of the net, which he connects with, and it goes in off of Johansson's stick. It's a power play goal for the Kraken, and they bring themselves within 2 goals. It's 3-1. Again, the first power play goal in franchise history after having been for, well, a lot at home on the power play, but either way, this one goes in, and for the Kraken, it's a much needed goal and a much needed power play goal. Plus, as Eberle gets a secondary assist on this one, he does increase his point streak to 5 games, which is a franchise record, obviously. And right after that goal, if you blinked or let's say hypothetically took a second to take note of what just happened for the video that you were going to make after the game, then you might have missed the Kraken getting right back onto the power play as a quick charge into the offensive zone off of the faceoff leads to another call on Minnesota, and the Kraken are right back on the power play with a chance to pull within 1. Unfortunately, while this power play does once again create some pressure and get a number of shots off, the second half of it does get killed off by a couple of turnovers and maybe a little bit too much passing again. Either way, it's certainly a better looking power play than the first one that doesn't work, but it still results in no goals. Now, let's talk about the end of this game. At this point, we're about halfway through the third period, and the Kraken have all sorts of momentum, offensive zone pressure, getting shots off on net. Everything really seems like it's going their way, even coming off of that second power play, which comes up short. So with 5 minutes left, it really looks like there's a pretty decent chance that the Kraken could pull to within 1 goal at 5-on-5, and then maybe with a minute or 2 left, you pull Grubauer, and with 6-on-5, you can make some magic happen, get on the board again, and get this game to overtime. However, as we might remember from the Anaheim game, there was a questionable decision as to the timing of when to pull Grubauer, as with over 3 minutes left in that game with a 1-goal lead, they pull Grubauer while still in the middle of a slow change and without clear possession of the puck in the offensive end. Of course, it still is at Anaheim's end of the ice, but again, there isn't clear possession, and of course, as soon as Grubauer's pulled, Anaheim does win that board battle, a couple of quick passes, and the puck finds the back of the net. Anaheim quickly goes up 2 goals with that empty netter, and then are able to extend it to 3 goals with another empty netter later. So back to this game, with over 5 minutes left in the game, as there's a face-off in the offensive zone, the Kraken decide to pull Grubauer with over 5 minutes left and a 2-goal lead while they've had all sorts of momentum. And yes, I get that pulling the goalie and having that extra man gives them an advantage, and with a 2-goal deficit to make up, a little extra time might be a good thing, but 5 minutes? That did seem quite excessive, and of course, off of the face-off, Minnesota does win this one, and it does not take too long at all for them to find the empty net and go up 4-1. And even after the empty netter, which basically ends up icing the game even with 5 minutes left, the Kraken continue to leave the net empty. I mean, you might as well at this point, you're down 3 goals, so what's the worst that could really happen? The game's basically over anyway. Eventually, it does actually lead to another Kraken goal. This time, it's Johansson to Wennberg, who roofs it in for the Kraken's second goal of the game, with Schwartz as the middleman. It's a nice goal from Wennberg, but ultimately meaningless, as the Wild, after missing a couple of empty net chances to once again increase the lead, are able to close this one out and win 4-2. For the Kraken, again, it's another disappointing loss. This time, not so much because it's a beatable team that they were playing, more just because it's a 4th loss in a row, and anytime you lose 4 consecutive games, it's disappointing regardless of who you're playing against. They are at least able to bounce back from the Anaheim game in that they get back to old tricks by losing a game while winning most statistical categories. They're able to win faceoffs for the second straight game, which is a good sign. They end up winning shots on goal, hits, and again, possession, though they don't win on the scoreboard where it ends up mattering. And honestly, even with all of those stats in their favor, this is a game where the Wild did look like the better team for the vast majority of it. And now with a 4-10-1 record, do I really still believe that this is a team that has a chance to end up making a run of it and become competitive by the end of the season? Yeah, there's definitely still a chance. Again, their underlying numbers and all that we've talked about do look good from game to game and look like a team that should be able to compete in, again, a division that really wasn't supposed to be particularly competitive. But it definitely has to be said that at least the California teams, who we didn't expect a lot of, have all gotten off to surprisingly good starts, while the Kraken have really dug themselves a pretty big hole that now, with a 3-day break, are going to have to figure out how to start digging their way out of coming into these last 4 games of this homestand. The first of which on Wednesday is coming against one of the very few teams at this point who have a worse record on the season than the Kraken, in the Chicago Blackhawks. As always, though, I'd love to hear what you guys think. I know there's a few of you who are even more optimistic than I am about this team's prospects going forward this season and their chances of digging out of this hole and getting back in the playoff hunt towards the end of the season. Plus, I also know there's some of you who at this point are ready for them to just tear it down and try to get as good of a draft pick as they can and build for the future. So let me know where you're at, and if you are on the optimistic end, maybe what changes you'd like to see them make in order to get that turnaround to happen. Like, for example, putting Hayden Fleury in. Otherwise, if you've made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel that I would appreciate you using. And until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, and go Kraken.